Greetings, adventurers. You're listening to The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood with me, Professor Atwood. I'm glad you're here, and I can't wait to tell you about my latest journey. Don't worry, it's a safe space. I'll handle all the danger for you. I designed these stories to help you relax, chill anxiety, and go to sleep. Maybe they'll even put a smile on your face, even if it's a sleepy smile. So please, settle in, relax, and prepare to quietly drift off with me to parts known, unknown, and even some places in between. Comfortable? Very well. Let's get underway. Hello, adventurers. I hope you're doing well. As you remember from last time, things were unexpectedly heating up in the alternate universe Madagascar. Preparations were underway for our Oceanic Chef Challenge, with Beverly and Gillian each eyeing the prize of Best Oceanic Chef in 2 universes. The competition was to not only have them get their rivalry out of their system once and for all, but we still needed large amounts of chromite to finish the repairs. We were in a universe devoid of cheese, remarkably, and thanks to apprentice scientist Chad and his inappropriately timed eating of a ham and cheese sandwich, we made an arrangement with Professor Niles and the alternate universe Madagascar scientists to trade the secret to making cheese for the chromite we needed to facilitate repairs. The Oceanic Chef competition would be cheese-centric, and this would allow for introducing cheese into this universe, for better or for worse. Now, I wasn't too worried. I mean, it was cheese, after all, and we needed the chromite to get home, so we had no other choice. It seemed that to resolve this conflict, the only way to get our chefs to work together was to not get them to work together, but rather in intense parallel via the culinary cheese-focused competition. Anyway, I'll tell you all about our great cheese-making competition and what followed in a moment. But first, I need to talk to you about a few things. First of all, you may have noticed some ads on the show now. I hope they are unobtrusive, but they are what's called programmatically inserted. So, despite the made-up tech name, it's a good thing. We are very happy to be at the level of programmatically inserted ads. And thank you, the adventurers listening, for making it happen. And of course, the more you listen, the better it is for everyone. So please, keep doing what you're doing. Now, I promise there won't be any midway rolling ads in the middle to break the story experience, so we'll limit the ads to the beginning and the end only. Scientifically, that's a fair compromise. But if you don't want any ads at all, that's an option too for White Cat Adventurers Club members. But that's not all you get. You'll also get some great extras in the White Cat Adventurers Club, like news, early access to the other podcast shows, sometimes this show, access to my irregular journal, more little tidbits about the company and upcoming projects, a bonus episode of another show called What Are You Watching, and more. But as another bonus, you'll get ad-free listening. So if these programmatically inserted ads do irritate you for whatever reason, including their name, you have another option. And all member tiers have ad-free listening, so it's something you could get at the first $5 level. But the main thing is to support the show. Science and exploring is expensive, and your support helps make it happen. And for just $5 a month, you can show your support for the show. At the $10 tier, you can even get some curated soundscapes of episodes periodically. Think of it as a blank adventure canvas for your ears and mind. And at $20, you can get an exclusive t-shirt. Please go to patreon.com/whitecatentertainment and enjoy the access your way. I also want to nudge you to please go into your podcast show player and rate the program with lots of stars. Now, reviews are great too, but ratings with stars will awaken the sleeping algorithm. That algorithm will then start pushing the show to all the people who may not know about it and may need it so they can discover it. So it's very important for sure, so please rate the show and add some stars. If you want to add a review too, that's extra great as well. It's always nice to read pleasant things about what we're doing over here. Thank you, adventurers. Just remember you have to be logged into your preferred podcast platform to leave a rating or review, as anonymous praise, for some reason, is frowned upon. Now, let's get back to the story. As you remember, the competition was broken up into 3 rounds: the cheese round, the entree round, and the dessert round. There would be an appetizer judging, but these would count for less, so Chad, the only judge, apparently, said not to dwell on appetizers, but it would still be a good idea to explore them if they could. It was almost as if he was asking for cheese-filled appetizers in an oddly passive-aggressive way. Nevertheless, it sounded like something to explore that may tip the balance in a close competition, so I was eager to see the culinary strategies each Oceanic chef was planning. Professor Niles had started the competition, and round 1 was well underway. Beverly and Dolores were busy making various cheeses. Now, it's not normally something you can make in a timed competition, but thanks to the alternate universe's food aging tech, it was indeed possible. A few of this universe's wine producers were a little irritated at having to give up their food aging tech, as until today it was only used for wine, but I think they will all be pleasantly surprised when they see how well cheese pairs with wine in the near future. Sounds of frustration and elation were coming in equal measure from both chefs as they made their various cheeses. It was difficult, tedious work, and more than a curd or two ended up on the floor, useless. But both chefs showed keen determination, and neither slowed down or gave any ground. Soon, with the help of Professor Niles' borrowed food aging machine, round 1 was completed. Beverly had made blue cheese, American cheese, and cheddar. Gillian had made cream cheese, mozzarella, and gorgonzola. They were all presented to Chad and the alternate universe Madagascar scientists, who were eagerly awaiting samples. Now Chad sniffed the cheeses first, as if he knew what to look for, and then took a bite of each. He said they were all delicious. The alternate universe Madagascar scientists eagerly gobbled up their samples, and a look of sheer bliss crossed their faces. They had never tasted anything like it. They didn't even realize yet that the best part of cheese is when you put it on or in something, not just eating it on its own. Now, I know that's up for debate, but I stand by my opinion of cheese usage. I'd always rather have pizza than a cheese plate. Suddenly, there was a small scuffle in the hall, and after a moment, Professor Niles mentioned to me that a rat-sized mouse had tried to get in, apparently lured by a scent he had never smelled before. He was ejected, and Professor Niles alerted the Tomasina Port Science Facility Security Office to be on alert in case there were others. I had a feeling this may be a problem, but we had to let things play out. Eventually, Chad finished sampling the cheese, dabbed the corner of his mouth with a napkin, and stood to announce his decision. He said while all the cheese was amazingly delicious, it was the mozzarella that put things over the top, giving the round to Gillian. Gillian smiled and the Wayfarer's crew cheered, as expected. Beverly and my crew looked disappointed. And I would just add that Gillian made burrata, which is kind of like mozzarella's fancier, more delicious cousin, so the comparison to plain old mozzarella may not even be quite fair. But I had faith in Beverly. I rallied her and the crew and told them it was just round 1. There was plenty of cheese left to go around. The entree round was really where the cheese skills would be presented for all to see and taste. Beverly smiled at the pep talk. Soon round 2, the entrees, was about to begin. However, before he started round 2, Professor Niles had a question. He wanted to know why one cheese was called American cheese when there wasn't really a French cheese, a Canadian cheese, or an Australian cheese? Why did the Americans have their own national cheese? Well, it was a good question, and I first added that no one really had a national cheese, just national cheese-like associations, but it would have been a lot to get into at that moment, so I opted for just a kind of a high-level explanation. I told him modern American cheese is a type of processed cheese developed in the 1910s made from cheddar, Colby, or similar cheeses. It is mild with a creamy and salty flavor, has a medium firm consistency, and has a low melting point. It is typically yellow or white in color. Yellow American cheese is seasoned and colored with annatto. British colonists made cheddar cheese soon after their arrival in North America. By 1790, American-made cheddars were being exported back to England. According to Robert Carlton Brown, author of The Complete Book of Cheese, what was known in America as yellow cheese or store cheese was known as American cheddar or Yankee cheddar back in England. The Oxford English Dictionary lists the first known usage of American cheese as occurring in the Frankfort, Kentucky newspaper, The Guardian of Freedom, in 1804. After patenting a new method for manufacturing processed cheese in 1916, James L. Kraft began marketing it in the late 1910s, and the term American cheese rapidly began to refer to the processed variety instead of the traditional but more expensive cheddars also made and sold in the U.S. Now, there were legal ramifications to American cheese that I did not get into with Professor Niles, as it seemed, well, tangential. But I do find it interesting, as the argument can be made that American cheese isn't truly cheese. You see, according to the Standards of Identity for Dairy Products, part of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, or the CFR, to be labeled American cheese, a processed cheese is required to be manufactured from cheddar cheese, Colby cheese, washed curd cheese, or granular cheese, or any mixture of two or more of these. The CFR also includes regulations for the manufacturing of processed American cheese. Because its manufacturing process differs from traditional cheeses, federal laws mandate that it be labeled as pasteurized processed American cheese if made from combining more than one cheese, or pasteurized processed American cheese food if it contains at least 51% cheese, but other specific dairy ingredients such as cream, milk, skim milk, buttermilk, or cheese whey are added. Products that have other added ingredients such as Kraft singles that contain milk protein concentrate use legally unregulated terms such as pasteurized prepared cheese product. Boy, that sounds appetizing, doesn't it? Whenever you have the thing you want followed by the word product, you may want to keep shopping. Remember, it's always better to have cheese as a noun, not an adjective. Soon, round 2 was beginning. It was the entree round. It would take a bit longer, but no one was in a hurry. Since Gillian had brought mozzarella into the universe, it did not surprise me that she was going for Italian cuisine. And her lasagna was already pretty amazing, but she was limited to the cheeses she had created in round 1, so it could not be a 4 or 5 cheese lasagna, something I enjoyed on our first day in this universe when I met Professor Felice on his ship, the Wayfarer. Beverly, on the other hand, seemed to be going for comfort food. She was making what looked like a barbecue bacon double cheeseburger with chili fries on the side. Obviously, both these entrees would be cheese-centric, but I wondered if they were both overdoing it due to their Oceanic chef rivalry. They would occasionally glance over at each other to see what the other was doing, but then their professionalism would take over and they would focus solely on the meal at hand. From what I could tell, Gillian was indeed making lasagna. If it isn't broke, etc., etc. She was able to acquire lasagna noodles in the universe, or Bradley was, as they did have cheeseless lasagna, although here they just called it lasagna. And then I understood what Gillian was doing. She was not only preparing a delicious entree, She was making it a point to reinvent all of Italian cuisine, which in our universe is pretty much based on cheese. Even spaghetti sauce gets delicious grated Parmesan cheese on top, so it was a sound strategy. Beverly would really have to up her game to defeat her this round. As you know, in our universe, lasagna is a type of pasta, possibly one of the oldest types, made of very wide, flat sheets. Either term can also refer to an Italian dish made of stacked layers of lasagna alternating with fillings such as ragu, which is ground meat and tomato sauce, vegetables, cheeses, which may include ricotta, mozzarella, and parmesan, and seasonings and spices like Italian seasonings such as garlic, oregano, and basil. However, Gillian's would indeed be different, as she only had mozzarella, well, burrata, which like I said was mozzarella's creamier, fancier cousin, gorgonzola, and cream cheese to work with. Lasagna normally may be topped with grated cheese, which becomes melted after baking, but that wasn't an option here. No extra cheeses brought from the ships were allowed in the competition, no matter how much more delicious it would make the meals. Typically, cooked pasta is assembled with the other ingredients and then baked in an oven. The resulting baked pasta is cut into single-serving square portions. Now, lasagna originated in Italy during the Middle Ages. The oldest transcribed text about lasagna appears in 1282 in the Memoriale Bolognesi, which sounds like a sacred Italian text from a Dan Brown novel, but it isn't. Anyway, lasagna was mentioned in a poem transcribed by a Bolognese notary, while the first recorded recipe was set down in the early 14th century in the Book of Cookery. Now, it bore only a slight resemblance to the later traditional form of lasagna, featuring a fermented dough flattened into thin sheets, boiled, sprinkled with cheese and spices, and then eaten with a small pointed stick. No one's really sure why. I mean, it's not like they didn't have utensils back then. Perhaps a chef lost a drunken bet, but we'll never know. In other regions, lasagna can be made with various combinations of ricotta or mozzarella cheese, tomato sauce, meats like beef, pork, chicken, vegetables like spinach, zucchini, olives, and mushrooms, and the dish is typically flavored with wine, garlic, onion, and oregano. In all cases, the lasagna is baked. While Gillian took precautions to make sure everything she was doing to her lasagna wasn't telegraphed, I could tell she was being as creative as she could with what she had to work with. Beverly, on the other hand, seemed to not worry about anyone seeing her process. She was happily flipping burgers on a grill, frying up bacon, and making a homemade barbecue sauce. Her chili she seemed to take a little more time concealing, but she made it look like she wasn't. She was trying to be casual about it, and I think she took some advice from Dolores, our mercenary/security officer, who made being casual an art form. The smells from the competition were enticing. Depending on where you were sitting, you could smell bacon, meatballs, spaghetti sauce, or barbecue sauce. It would be a tough one, and I didn't envy Chad having to pick a winner for this round. Soon Gillian's oven bell dinged, and everyone inhaled with anticipation. There wasn't much time left in the round, and across the floor, Beverly was putting the finishing touches on her burgers, as well as giving her chili cheese fries a healthy, or unhealthy depending on your perspective, dose of newly fermented melted cheddar cheese. The burgers had a mix of cheddar and American cheese on them, which was then topped with bacon, barbecue sauce, and caramelized onions. Time was running out on round 2, but Gillian and Beverly would both finish on time, as they were pros and knew how to not only work in tight galley conditions, but knew how to cook quickly and efficiently no matter the circumstances. It's what made Oceanic chefs so valuable and in demand. The smells of lasagna and burgers were competing for our nostrils, but nobody cared. They were both delightful. Now let me just say a note about how much was being cooked. While this was a competition, one of the rules was that there had to be enough food for everyone. But there was no way Beverly and Gillian could do that and compete. So when they were done, a second round, led by note-taking alternate universe Madagascar Thomasina Port Science Facility chefs, went to work to replicate each recipe so everyone could enjoy what the two chefs were creating. So, in a nutshell, the chefs would create the food for the round, Chad would judge, and then the food would be replicated for everyone after. So the support chefs were most likely still on the round one cheese replication as Beverly and Gillian presented their entrees to Chad. First was the lasagna from Gillian, and Chad had a big smile on his face. I'm sure it was delicious, but we would have to wait a bit before getting to taste it, as we would be around behind as the support chefs worked to replicate these culinary achievements. From what I could tell from my vantage point, Gillian had cleverly layered the lasagna with mozzarella, burrata, and cream cheese in lieu of ricotta. Then the whole thing was covered in a meat sauce that had been simmering for hours. She had secretly started the sauce during round one to give it more time to simmer. Honestly, from how Chad reacted, I thought she was going to have this round in the bag, but I knew not to count Beverly out. After Chad demanded some orange sherbet as a palate cleanser, he was ready for Beverly's entree. And it looked amazing. Honestly, we were all getting hungrier by the second. The burgers steamed and the cheese looked perfectly melted. There was a large monitor set up so the audience could see every detail as the food was delivered to Chad. Now, I think they could have turned the monitor off after that, so we didn't have to watch Chad eat, but that didn't seem to be happening. Chad dug into the burger and made some appreciative grunts. It was so good. He dug into the chili cheese fries as well, but he definitely seemed to focus on the burger. It also looked like he wasn't about to do any actual tasting, but eat the entire thing. Beverly let a smile grow on her face as she watched his reaction. Well, we all did, because the monitor was still on. Soon Chad was finished and wiping ketchup off his face. He looked stuffed, and didn't really have to eat the whole burger, but he did. Chad mentioned that there's nothing like a good burger, and it reminded him of a backyard barbecue with family and friends that was also catered by a top-notch chef. A backyard barbecue with family and friends that you don't always get invited to, but where the food is amazing. I'm not really sure where he was going with that train of thought, but he rambled on for another minute about food trucks, sprinklers, and birthday parties until he finally petered out. He had made his decision. To no one's surprise, this round went to Beverly. This time, my crew erupted in cheers, and Professor Felice's crew engaged in some polite applause. There was only one round left. The dessert round was last, and it was 1-1. This would be the tiebreaker. Since Gillian had created cream cheese, it was obvious what she was going for. Cheesecake. Something flavorful that would show the versatility of cheese. Also, very strategic. Beverly, on the other hand, took another approach and made an apple cheddar cobbler where the focus wasn't completely on the cheese. Bold, but risky. Soon the delicious smells of tomato sauce and barbecue were replaced with roasting apples and the sweet smell of cheesecake with a fresh strawberry glaze. Honestly, it would be a tough final round. I had to give Professor Niles a brief explanation on what cheesecake actually was, as he was curious. I told him cheesecake is a sweet dessert consisting of one or more layers. The main and thickest layer consists of a mixture of soft, fresh cheese, typically cottage cheese, cream cheese, or ricotta, eggs, and sugar. If there is a bottom layer, it most often consists of a crust or base made from crushed cookies, graham crackers, pastry, or sometimes even sponge cake. Cheesecake may be baked or unbaked, and is usually refrigerated. Gillian was going for baked and a traditional graham cracker crust. Cheesecake is usually sweetened with sugar and may be flavored in different ways: vanilla, spices, lemon, chocolate, pumpkin, or other flavors may be added to the main cheese layer. Additional flavors and visual appeal may be added by topping the finished dessert with fruit, whipped cream, nuts, cookies, fruit sauce, chocolate syrup, or other ingredients. But again, Gillian went for the classic strawberries in a fruit glaze. She wanted the cheese to shine through. After what seemed like forever, the desserts were plated and brought to Chad. Thankfully, they turned off the giant monitors this time when he started eating. He enjoyed both thoroughly. He wasn't the most, how can I put this, efficient eater. Not all the food ended up in his mouth. I don't know, it was kind of like watching a toddler at snack time in a lab coat. Anyway, he enjoyed both thoroughly, but I could tell he was leaning towards the cheesecake. He commented on how rich and creamy it was, but also commented on the bold move of using cheese as an enhancement of a cobbler. Things didn't look good for Beverly, and she knew it. The strawberry cheesecake was winning. And that's when Beverly pulled out a surprise dish, appetizers. She had been making them in secret and took advantage of the appetizer optional rule. Gillian did not look happy as she put all her time in the entree, her simmering bolognese sauce, and the cheesecake. Beverly brought out potato skins and garlic cheese bread, one accompaniment for each of the meals she and Gillian were making. Sure, it was a little late for appetizers, but with a wave of his hand, Chad announced that he would allow it. Chad took one bite of the potato skins and then one bite of the garlic cheese bread. The look on his face said it all. It was enough to put Beverly over the top. She was declared the winner. My crew erupted in applause, and Professor Felice's crew clapped sincerely as well. Even though their chef had lost, they were impressed with what Beverly had accomplished. No matter who had won the competition, there was a bit of relief in the air. The pressure was now off. The competition had ended, and Beverly was the winner. She pulled it out with some surprise appetizers, and it paid off. So Beverly received the Golden Rat Trophy, which seemed to be a high honor, another anomaly native to this dimension, but we all just kind of went with it, even Chad. But then the moment of truth came. Beverly and Gillian stared at each other for a moment, and I quickly scanned the area for loose cabbages and carrots, but luckily there were none in the vicinity. While Gillian had used her cream cheese to make cheesecake, Beverly had used her cheddar to make an apple cheddar cobbler to show how a traditional dessert could be enhanced with cheese rather than making the cheese the focus of attention. It worked, but it was really the appetizers consisting of garlic cheese bread and potato skins that put things over the top for her. Beverly, slowly and deliberately, handed Gillian a bowl of her apple cheddar cobbler, but also went to the table and grabbed a slice of Gillian's cheesecake. She took a bite and then said it was the best cheesecake she'd ever tasted, but then recommended maybe one less teaspoon of lemon juice next time. There was a moment of quiet and a few nervous inhales, but it was soon met with roaring laughter from Gillian and then Beverly. They hugged, congratulated each other on an amazing performance, and promised never to quarrel again. They even mentioned that they had forgotten the name of that sous chef they both had a crush on that didn't like either of them so many years ago, and they were so sorry it took getting stuck in an alternate dimension for them to reconnect. They continued to hug as tears flowed, and it was a beautiful thing to watch. Two people reconciling can be a long journey, but it's one well worth taking for both parties. The contest was over, and I congratulated both contestants. They both did a fine job. We were all stuffed, and it was some of the best food we had had on the entire journey. Between mouthfuls of all the delicious cheese-centric goodness, Professor Niles said he and his team couldn't be happier, and they were able to replicate the cheese-making process from start to finish. Some of their chefs and scientists were already eager to experiment to create all different types of cheeses, and were already asking if I could recommend any other mammals. Well, now this was a potential can of worms that I needed to nip in the bud quickly. I told them to stick with cows for the time being, but then maybe goats at some point. I also recommended we stop the discussion there before things got awkward and uncomfortable. The last thing I wanted to do was be presented with a list of milk-producing mammals and checking yes or no on their cheese-making viability. Professor Niles smiled, wiped some barbecue sauce from his mouth, and grabbed my shoulders. He looked me in the eye and told me we could have all the chromite we needed. I smiled back and told him I was glad to help. We were at the tail end of this unexpected alternate universe journey, and everyone was eager to go home. Well, everyone but one person, and I'll tell you all about it next time. But before I end this evening's story, I want to talk a little bit about reconciliation. It's a fancy word for people getting along again who didn't for a while, and it's also a fancy word for politicians and lawyers to use to make them sound smart. It doesn't always work. Anyway, two people reconciling their differences and reconnecting is something inherently positive and inherently human. We all make mistakes, and sometimes we wrong other people. Sometimes we're the ones who are hurt. But to hold on to that hurt doesn't do you any good, it doesn't help you, and then when that sneaky little liar, ego, gets involved, it prevents you from reconciling and then spending time with someone whose company you actually enjoyed at one point. The good thing is, if you really think about it and are honest with yourself, you know who in your life you should reconcile with and who you should not. But being honest with ourselves is sometimes even harder than the act of reconciling. But all in all, at the end of the day, or month, or year, reconciling with someone is a homecoming and a burden set down. So don't be afraid to look inward, and don't be afraid to take the first step. Offer someone your homemade dessert and compliment theirs. You just might find that you still have more in common than you thought. Good night, adventurers.
The Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood was created, written, and performed by Chris Mancini and produced by White Cat Entertainment. It is a work of fiction. Maybe. Music and sound design by Ron Tansky at rontanskymusic.com. For more info and merchandise, including t-shirts, mugs, and blankets, go to whitecatentertainment.com.